Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a 10-game Major League Baseball slate for you. Before I get started, could you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It really helps the channel a lot. Alright, so in this slate, we do have a very interesting one. I don't like this slate a ton because obviously there's a game in Colorado, and it's a large slate, and that game will either make or break the slate one direction or the other, likely, especially here, and so it does look like a pretty rough slate from that perspective. There's a ton of pitchers that have decent stuff today, but there's not really a ton that really look great other than Cole Reagans. And then we have a couple bats that are good, with Hunter Goodman being a core play for us. But overall, this slate is pretty wild, so let's go ahead and get into it. Let's check the weather first. So let's pull up the weather here for this here. So I do look at looks like everything's good weather-wise, so it should be a fine slate from that perspective at the very least. So let's go ahead and get our pitchers. So we have one pitcher that stands out, and that is Cole Reagans. He's been pretty fantastic as of late. He's also been good in 2 games against Detroit, where he averaged 30 fantasy points a game. Only gave up 2 earned runs on that and had over 18 strikeouts in that stretch. So he's got the best strikeout stuff on the slate. Great option and a core play for me. He's also going to be the second highest owned player. The other highest owned player will be Zach Wheeler for Philly. Now, he's obviously been good against Milwaukee at once, and he's been really, really good lately. He does have a little bit of risk there, though, because Milwaukee can have good games at times, and I do think that he's capable of giving up a bad game occasionally. But overall, he's in a really solid spot here, and he has a good strikeout potential as well. So both those guys are definitely capable, and the P1 options here. Now, obviously, you could use both of them, but that would be hard to do on the slate. Looking at some other options, though, so Michael King against San Diego is a high risk, high reward thing, but he does have enough strikeout potential today. Same goes for Eovaldi. He has pretty good matchup here against Toronto, though he has had some ups and downs lately, but he has a high ceiling. Hunter Brown is interesting with a decent strikeout rate against San Diego, but I do think he's a little bit riskier than some of the other options on the slate. Gill is going to be an interesting play that's going to have some pretty good ownership today, despite the fact that he's struggled a lot lately. I do think he has some upside in this matchup, though, and he has enough strikeout potential to be decent. Wu for Seattle is interesting, as he did blank the Yankees the one time he pitched against them this season. The Yankees do have some guys that strike out a lot, so that definitely helps him, but his strikeout rate is a little bit lower than some of the other options on the slate. He will be somewhat low ownership as well. Bassett for Toronto has a favorable matchup against a reeling Texas team right now, though he has been kind of been robust lately, so to keep that in mind. And then finally, McGill for the Mets is an interesting spot here against the Washington Nationals, despite having a bad game the first time he pitched against them. The real issue here is that he doesn't have the highest K rates on the slate, and we definitely need a good strikeout pitcher on this one. The ownership will be Wheeler, Reagans, McGill, Bassett of the top 4 there, and then King and Brown will be the very contrarian options that won't have hardly any ownership. So if you think that you like those guys, then definitely consider them. Looking at the boomer bust plays, Lance Lynn, Frankie Montas, Parker for the Mets, where there'd be the 3 boomer bust guys, and then a Hail Mary would be Canning for the Angels against the White Sox. Not because Canning looks particularly good, but just because the White Sox are so terribly bad. And if you want to punt one pitcher, then he's a cheap way to do that. So let's look at our catchers. Hunter Goodman is the top overall play at this position. In fact, he's one of the best options on the slate. He hit a home run yesterday. He's actually been hitting the ball pretty good the last few games. That definitely gives us a lot of potential here, even though he has stunk most of the season when he's played. This particular situation gives him a lot of potential. And also, we should note, like, if we look at his home games, he's averaged 7.5 fantasy points a game versus on the road only 3. So, which is, common for below average players. But he definitely going to have a lot of ownership here. The other owned guy will be Gabriel Moreno for Arizona. That's also going to be in the same ballpark. Looking at first base, Christian Walker does jump off the page as a great option on the slate for Arizona. He's been phenomenal against Colorado this season. He didn't get anything yesterday, but he did get a hit. I do think he's capable of hitting a home run today, though, so he's definitely worth a look. But a nice value play here is Lucan. Where'd he go? Lucan Baker for St. Louis. Now, he has struggled so far, but he does have some good hitting metrics today, so he's definitely worth a look. And he's dirt cheap at $3,200. You could also look at Bryce Harper and Paul Goldschmidt as contrarian plays at this position. The ownership here will be Pavin Smith, Nico Cavadas, Paul Goldschmidt, and Andy Ibanez. Looking at second base, Ketel Marte, he smacked some homers yesterday, or at least one yesterday, and he hit the ball very well. I look for him to continue to try to hit the ball hard in this park, and he's definitely capable of another one. Looking at Brendan Rodgers, he's a good contrarian play here, a little bit cheap, uh, but he is at home, so he should have some potential for a home run. And he's also cheap enough that he's a viable option. The ownership will also go to Ketel Marte and Brendan Rodgers, so definitely want to be chalky here at second base. Looking at third base, we do like Eugenio Suarez for Arizona. He didn't do anything yesterday, unfortunately, but he definitely draws good fantasy metrics today. Another guy I like a lot is Jazz Chisholm Jr. He's been phenomenal since he joined the Yankees, though he hadn't had a home run in a while, so he's kind of due, and he's got that power potential on the slate. The low-owned upside guy would be Eric Wageman for the Angels. Now, he's only played in a couple games, but he's really been hitting the ball pretty well the last 3 games, so I think he's in a viable spot, and he's only $2,200. And this is a position you can definitely punt if you want, because the top owned plays will be Andy Ibanez and Nolan Arenado. Don't really expect a lot out of much at this position, so getting a cheap option there is definitely a way to help you pay up at the positions. Looking at shortstop, Bobby Witt hit a home run yesterday. We liked him a lot, and he gave us that home run. He's been hitting the ball very well this season. His hitting metrics are off the charts today. Tovair for Colorado also looks phenomenal today, though he is expensive here, more than I'd like to pay for him. But he is in Colorado, so that helps. And then Mason Wynn, he's kind of a contrarian play, but he's nice and cheap today. Gives you some upside and has some nice potential, especially against a team that he's been decent against this season. I think he's in a solid position there. Ezekiel Tovar will be the top ownership option, but the low-owned upside guy, Geraldo Perdomo. Outfield is kind of lackluster today. So we have a lot of Arizona guys like Corbin Carroll, Jock Peterson, Jake McCarthy. We have a couple of guys from Colorado and Hunter Goodman and Britton Doyle. Now, Goodman is our core play at catcher, but he can also fit in the outfield if you want to save a little money. A couple other guys, though, to consider would be Carl Schwarber, whose home run metric is literally off the chart today. He has been phenomenal at hitting home runs at times. He is kind of a boom bust play. He's super expensive for the matchup, but he does have that home run upside best on the slate. Luis Robert Jr. also very interesting today as kind of a cheap option here at $4,300. I think he's a very contrarian option. He's looked pretty good recently, and he's had some really good hitting games. He's cheap enough that he's a viable option here. But we do have one kind of Hail Mary play in Campero for the Angels. If he draws a start, he's minimum price here, and he has some potential as a good hitter right now with good hitting metrics today. So the ownership at this position, Corbin Carroll, Hunter Goodman, Jock Peterson, Taylor Ward, Jake McCarthy, and Pavin Smith. The data suggests that Arizona-Colorado game is going to be a fire one.